Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for June 2nd, 2025. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. It is episode 220, and I have with me very popular guest who, gave me the great compliment the other day saying, damn, you're the only guy I want to talk to anymore. So Vince Lanci is back. And
I didn't say that. That was another Tom.
was that?
Sorry.
No, it was another Tom again. Thanks, Vince. I appreciate that. No, it was just so you guys know, like Vince and I chat privately all the time, and invariably the texts are hilarious. So Vince, how are you?
I'm good. Good to be back, and good to have you back from Canada. I heard you killed it with your speech, with your talk. Speech is probably not the right word, but with your talk.
It was a piece of rhetoric. Let's just put it that way. And it was a constructive piece of rhetoric, and I think it did go very, very well. It is really sad that you couldn't join us for Cornerstone, not the least of which I think it was just you would have really found like a whole like group of people that were just like they're your people. Vince, it was a good time, and we would have loved to have had you at the GG&G brunch that we did. Marty Armstrong was there, Alex Craner was there. We were all there, had barbecue, chatted, had a great time. And it was amazing, and I really enjoyed it. And shout out to Sean Newman as always. Sean did a great job putting everything together. Shout out to the guys at Gold Silver Bull as well. I just got done doing 2 hours with Sean talking about. I just blew his mind getting him to read Philip K. Dick for the first time, and he's like, "Oh my god!"
Getting read Phil what?
Reading Philip K. Dick for the first time. The writer. I had my speech was centered around a moment in the book Ubik, which is my favorite novel of all time. And Sean went ahead and read it on his drive down to Calgary, listened to it on his way down to Calgary, and he was like, "Okay, I get it." And his mind equals blown. It was great. So, right. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. I just did that half an hour with Sean Newman. What I heard through the scuttlebutt, I was telling you earlier, is that as busy as I've been and just trying to get caught up, to be honest with you, that, I've heard this from a couple of your people, your patrons people who are patrons for both of our services, that you have been really adding some color and some dotting I's, crossing T's to the discussion that Caitlin Long and I had in episode 213 about stablecoins and U.S. treasuries and all that stuff. So I'm just going to leave it there and let you go because I want to hear what you have to say about all that, because you and I really have a chance to put a lot of color on that. So
the statement is that I believe that the U.S. is moving towards, for multiple reasons, integrating stablecoins from a different conclusion from what you and Caitlin talked about, but the overlap is what we're here for, right? The U.S. is approaching it from a different discipline. The U.S. is in the process of integrating stablecoins into its finance community for multiple reasons. One of them is it will disintermediate banks. And Trump is not a financial person, meaning he doesn't like financial intermediaries like banks. It won't disintermediate all of them. It'll just allow them to trim even more banks off of the top. So you end up having, two banks, JP Morgan and Bank of America. But the point is, it'll streamline finance, number one, and lower cost. Number two, it will find us a home for treasuries and another country, like I'm looking at it like a nation. And number three, it becomes an upside call on America. So so that's what it comes down to. So the reason that I had this, I guess, this thesis, right, where there's always pieces of a puzzle out there or dots that I can't connect because I'm missing a piece, and this piece doesn't completely connect it. But the conversation that you and Caitlin had, and the behavior of the president and the behavior of Bissett, you start connecting those dots, and you say, well, even if they're not thinking of it, they should be. And so that's where I was. And then it fell into my lap with the conversation you and Caitlin had, and a couple other things that I saw. So here's the conclusion is that the U.S. will use the primary point is the U.S. will use stablecoins to encourage holdings of U.S. Treasuries to go up. That's
Mhm.
it. That's at the very grassroots level. And the way they're going to do that is they're going to convert treasuries into, to use an options phrase, they're going to convert treasuries into a call, not a put. So you own treasuries for safety. Fine. You're not happy about the safety anymore because you're worried about counterparty risk because of the Russia-Ukraine stuff. Fine. We're with you on that. We understand that. We know we're not going to change your mind in the short term, right? However, how would you like to have access to our stablecoins? How would you like to have access to our capital markets? Well, you can do that through these tethered type of products, these
Mhm.
stablecoin type of products. And to do that, you can use, we don't care about dollars. I mean, this is me dramatizing, but we don't care about dollars. We care about treasuries. You don't have to sell treasuries to own stablecoins. You can pledge treasuries as collateral. So how would you like to get 4 or 5% interest and have access to our markets? And so you become a lender to the US and will give you access to our markets. And all these things started to click for me. Uh, here's a couple seemingly random points. So going back to Bessent, when he and Trump and Lutnick were there, and they said, we're going to monetize the balance sheet of the US. And you and I discussed that. It was like real
Mhm.
estate, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that type of
Right.
stuff, HELOC, that type of concept. And then there was gold, which is the easier one to see. But those were all there. And there's other assets. And one of the assets that I had read about was Swift itself. And I'm simplifying it, but access to the US capital market is like getting access to an ATM, right? So
Mhm.
the problem is we want to monetize an asset. And that asset is our plumbing,
Mhm.
the Swift plumbing, access to our payment chains should be monetized. If you want access to our payment chains, you should pay us. Well, how do you do that? All right. Well, you can do that a million different ways. But that's the first point, right? The second point is, and this is the easiest one to see, is that there is a de-dollarization going on. And at what point it will end, we don't know, but it'll find a new stability. But on the way there, we need to cushion the blow of it. So people are going to sell their, you can't, I say this sincerely. If you are of the mindset that the US can confiscate, if you believe that there's counterparty risk with the US, then you believe there's existential counterparty risk. And if you believe that, then there's nothing that can compete with gold for you, that is treasuries. I'm not saying you won't have a mix of the two, but you're going to have a bigger portion of your assets in gold. And if you look at, say, a central bank, whether it be East or West, you're going to diversify your FX reserves out of dollars and into gold because people are going to be using gold more in transactions. Fine. All right. So
Mhm.
we need to monetize our payment chains, and we need to find a reason for people to own bonds because they're not owning it for safety anymore. And then the Genius Act passes, the Stablecoin Genius Act passes. And I had been watching the previous 2 years I was watching, but I stopped watching. I'm like, Gensler, et cetera, et cetera. But Gensler's out, and the Genius Act passes, and I'm not so sure that I have everything on this. But what I see is the US wants to own the stablecoin market, or at least have the best and be at the forefront of it. The best,
Yes.
we have the best. Look, as an American, we suck at this, we suck at that, fine. But in the world, we have the best regulatory system. They take their cue from us. We have the
Yep.
rule of law. We have the best financial infrastructure. On a bad day, it's number one. Like there's no number two in that respect. At least not in the financial aspect of it. So when you look at those things, and then you see Trump going around, this is where Trump's going around and doing, this is perfect for Trump, by the way, in terms of he's a horse trader. He wants to do bilateral deals. But the third point is you see Trump going around needing to do bilateral deals with countries. And the Saudis are the one that really made me go, oh shit, this makes sense. So what does he do? He goes to the Saudis and he says, I mean, among other things, he says, how do I get the Saudis to keep buying treasuries? They're already buying gold. They're already doing business with China. How do I get them to buy treasuries? Well, you have to convert the US Treasury market from a safety feature to an upside feature. So Saudis, we've been doing that forever with them. Saudis buy our treasuries and we'll give you a discount on more jets. Whatever. We'll make sure you don't get blown away if Iran gets a nuclear missile, stuff like that. Right. All right. And then I say, well, why are they committing to buy more treasuries? What did we give them to sweeten the deal? And in the 70s, the deal was sweetened with higher interest rates. So that's upside. It's not protection, right? So what do we sweeten the deal with now? I mean, I don't know what they sweeten the deal with, but I can picture this. I can picture this. We go to a country and we say, all right, you're going to be our trade partner. And for being our trade partner and buying treasuries, here's what we're going to do for you. It's like negotiating an apartment building to be built in your city. This is what Trump does. He's a real estate corporatist. He goes to the Saudis and he says, hypothetically, he says, we're going to start charging nations to have access to our capital markets, capital controls of the outside coming in. And of course, as you mentioned, and I agree with, soft capital controls like, 2 years ago, and then a year ago, and then 6 months ago, and now people are talking about it. We're going to restrict capital flows because unfortunately, that's part of mercantilism. You got to protect where the money goes. But just getting back on point. So you say to the Saudis, you say, you buy our treasuries, that's a hall pass to come in and out of our country as much as you want with your dollars, and we're not going to charge you a fee. Other people are going to charge a fee. Do you want to buy Bitcoin? You can buy it through our stablecoins, and you can use your treasuries to vouch for stablecoins. So it becomes like a call option. I'm not being very eloquent about it, but what I see is I see stablecoins. The Genius Act creates stablecoins as a product that will be closely regulated and protected and expanded by the U.S. under the FDIC banks and the companies like PayPal. I see that product growing and taking market share from regular banking. I see it potentially decimating the model of the Eurodollar, especially the British bankers, which is right up your alley.
Right.
And my alley too now, to be honest with you. I've been totally converted on that. And I see us finding our country to buy treasuries. So if China says we're selling treasuries and we're buying gold, half the world's going to say, we're going to buy the Chinese yuan because it's safer than US dollar. And then we're going to say, fine, you can have your fucking gold. Okay. We've got innovation. We've got ideas, and you can have access to that in our nightclub over here, which is where the hot chicks are, And so so it becomes, the Chinese model becomes the safety model, and our model becomes the innovation model. So anyway, I'm not really doing a just good job of explaining it, except to say that I think stable coins and Tether will become products that things like gold can be put into, and Bitcoin and crypto and anything else, which will do so many things for us if it works. It'll increase the holdings of treasuries worldwide. It'll increase the holdings of treasuries domestically, and it will find other buyers. It's like we're colonizing Mars and they want to buy treasuries. We've created an abstract nation of commonality, of people who want to participate in the American dream, for lack of, it's a cheesy phrase, but you get my point. And so that's it. That's my whole spiel. Own bonds, help the nation.
Yeah, it makes it buy American.
Right.
It makes sense. Like when you lay it out that way, is the way Caitlin and I were describing it, the way she was describing it to me, and was Tether is internationalizing around the world and creating, and by virtue of the fact that it has to hold U.S. Treasuries or T-bills as reserves for the most part, that it's now bringing the U.S. Treasury market by proxy to the rest of the unbanked world that couldn't buy treasuries otherwise. So you're increasing the total addressable market of treasuries in a way that we haven't before. And you're just saying it's the exact same thing that we would have in reverse, which we would have domestic stable coins. We'd have a domestic dollar, crypto dollar, in effect, that
Crypto dollar, that's right. Yeah.
that our trade partners or our investing partners can then put their treasuries into, and create a soft demand for, in order to get access to that market. And what I would say to that, in some ways, what I'd say is that the way that's going to go without there being any kind of tax implications. Let's just start, because think about what Trump has said. I'm vamping, by the way. Everything, you actually did a better job of explaining all that than you think you did, which is so. So now we're going to move forward. So what I'm now going to vamp and say, well, what has Trump said about capital gains tax and about all of these things about American businesses? Partner with an American, invest in America, build here in America, do all these things in America, you will be exempt from these taxes. So this is how you can get access to dollars at par, but the dollars have to come in and stay here in the United States and invest in the United States. So as the world pulls back from some people who have a surfeit of treasuries, who have too many treasuries because of the years of the dollar reserve standard, it serves a couple of different purposes here as well. As they try to pull back and they need to internationalize their reserves, they can still have a way to. We have a way of absorbing the treasuries, creating a product that they can use to get dollars at par to invest in the United States, and then build and get a return on that money through investment, not through speculation and through sending our interest out. And this way, now all of a sudden, we're not even dealing with the we're not dealing with the same level of blunder, right? Of that effectively, everybody is now a partner in the labor that's being deployed here in the United States to pay for the interest on the treasuries, right?
Right. So we want your money. We'll build it. We want your money. Put your money here. Right?
Put your money here. Put your investment here, and we'll grow businesses that are We'll grow businesses that grow faster than the interest on the treasury debt, and it's net positive for the Treasury Department to pay out the interest because the tax revenues.
We have the structure. The rest of the world doesn't have that structure. We have the bones of that,
Right.
And it's like the rule of law, et cetera, et cetera. Give us the money. We're going to give you the upside. You're not going to have a problem with it. You're going to get the upside. Right. It's like it's
exactly. And then the other side of that is that it allows the United States. This is a very elegant way. Well, it sounds inelegant because we're now like putting the whole financial structure together. So there's a lot to take in here. But what it's really doing is very elegantly saying, yeah, and we're exiting the whole global reserve currency thing, and we're taking Triffin's paradox off of the table.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that's it. Can I jump in here?
Oh, absolutely. I'm done.
So you made 3 points. I'm saying this out loud so I remember. The first one was dollars at par. I got something to add to that. The second one was upside, right? And the third one was the last thing you just said. But I want to start with the dollars at par. See, there's a reason to do this, even if we don't need someone to buy our treasuries. There's a fucking reason to do this now, okay? And so here it is. The global reserve currency. I'm actually tying the last part in as well.
Sure.
We're keeping the title of global reserve currency and all the privileges without any of the fucking problems. That's what's going on, okay? So, I mean, that's what I say. All right, so here we go. Right. So you got me plugging into what you're saying. All right, so here we go. If we don't need anyone to buy our treasuries, everything is fine, but we don't want to be the global reserve currency for this reason. We don't want to be the global reserve currency in a world that you must export for the following reason. Triffin's dilemma. The global reserve currency, by its nature, is too strong. People are always running to it. And it's the nation who has that currency, to do what they can to weaken it. Now, whether the U.S. is trying hard enough or not is irrelevant. It's not weak enough, okay?
Right.
And it is, if you're a real economist and you understand this, it was in our interest over the last 50 years to be the stronger currency. We basically taxed the rest of the world and repressed their currencies, right? So so that was a tax on the rest of the world. But now that nobody's lending or borrowing anymore, we need to make stuff to pay our debt down. We can't just borrow anymore. Enter the global reserve currency as a problem. as this is, by the way, this is going to play probably right into the whole euro dollar stuff that you talk about. The global reserve currency, we treat our SWIFT and let's just say our plumbing, our payment chains as um, uh, cost, not profit centers, cost centers. That's where I'm looking for center, right? So if you treat it as a cost center, then you give it away for free. Everyone can use our plumbing. This is one of the things that makes the dollar worth too much. If there's a crisis, I hit a button, it's in dollars, right? So everything, there's no charge. It just goes into the US in dollars. And having free plumbing, not charging people a toll road, makes the dollar go up. Because if it's free and there's a crisis in the Middle East, I'll just park money in dollars, and everyone else who needs dollars suffers. Okay, so this is part of this is a proven model. Proven, I don't know, but this is a model that they want to use. If you monetize your plumbing, which is what we want to do, you make money. So there's a non-tariff revenue stream. You're monetizing an asset, and you weaken the dollar because all those people on the margin, Joe in Zimbabwe Sporting Goods, he's not going to hit a button and put his money into dollars because he can't afford the fee. And that's a market access charge. And we're doing that now. Like we're doing the antecedent of that. But so when you do that, you retain your global reserve currency status, but you unattract, you get rid of the hot money that's always parking itself in dollars.
Right.
That doesn't do anything with it. You get rid of the financial rentier class. That's what you do. You get rid of that. You get rid of that type.
Wow.
That
you're right. Yeah. And that's a great point, Vince.
I mean, so now to dovetail into isn't that what the euro dollar market is?
It's the rentier class. It's the hot money rentier class.
Right. I mean, if there's a problem, they put it like it really just fucking destroys the money that flows into dollars. So anyway, I mean, aside from the fact that I'm in love with this concept and probably myself for saying it because I know that you plug into this, it's just a fact that if you put a market access charge, an MAC, on your plumbing, you charge people money, you give capital charges for external money to come in. If you do that, your currency gets held by less people. So you have less people holding your currency, and the ones that do hold it are paying. And then, so that's the whole dollar. That's why I'm focused on dollars at par. What does that do, dollars at par? It has to do with this. Anyone who wants a dollar that you've cut a deal with, the Saudis, whatever country you cut a deal with, they get a dollar.
Right.
Anybody who wants a dollar that you haven't cut a deal with, they get 95 cents because we take a fee. Yes. All right. And so here's why the dollars at par triggered that for me.
Yes.
Years ago, this is a Jim Rickards moment. Years ago, I was talking about the war on cash, and that was a big thing with Jim Rickards. He had a book on that as well. And I was I'm like, how are they going to not support cash? Meaning what the government inevitably does is when it wants to make people do what it wants them to do, it gives them an economic choice. So right. Either you do it or I charge you more. That's what it comes down to, right? So somebody asked Jim a question, and the question was how are they going to not support cash? And at the time, Modi was like, if you don't return these bills and take smaller denominations, they're going to expire, stuff like that. I'm like, we can't do that. How are we going to do it? And Rickard said, we're already doing it. And I went, how are we already doing it? And he said, the phrase was, the dollar trades at par electronically. The dollar doesn't trade at par physically. I went, oh.
Right.
If you wire money, it no longer costs you $25. Zelle, fucking Venmo, PayPal, it's free. If you take money out of an ATM, it's very simple, but it's true. If you take money out of an ATM, it's $2. It didn't always used to be that way. Remember, the ATM was a cost center. Convenience, use the ATM, get your money anytime you want. Now it's a profit center, right? Yep. So we're turning our market access, not the market itself, our market access into an ATM that charges a fee. So do you want dollars at par? Cut a deal with Trump. Do you not want dollars at par? Well, then we don't fucking want you anymore. That's it. We're charging you more.
You've got it. So no, it was really funny. The other day I was talking about this. I was thinking about this the other day. So when I was working on last month's newsletter, I got obsessed with from the moment I sat and chatted with Caitlin along. I had all these like nascent ideas about an onshore dollar and an offshore dollar and all of this stuff, and that was rattling around in my head for a year and a half, and I had ideas about it, and some of that grew out of our initial conversation about putting capital controls up around gold, and doing away with the COMEX and LBMA and moving all that into GLD and SLB and all that stuff, right? So it started there, and I had other people coming up with other ideas, but when Caitlin said par, I then was like, okay, I've been obsessed with this idea of dollars at par as well. And then I thought about it. So somebody posted up on Twitter a list of the ECB accesses to the foreign repo window. Now, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was clear they were having to go out and buy dollars in the short term liquidity in dollars at 4.58% when SOFR was trading at 4.33%. So their SOFR, domestic dollars, cost our banks 4.33% in the repo markets, whereas the ECB has got to go get temporary liquidity from the Fed at 4.58%. There's your 26 basis points. We make their 25, 26 basis points. We make that. It's our spread. We get paid for it. The Fed gets that money. So you're charging, that's your ATM fee that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Right. Yeah. And what I've been saying for a while, when you listen now let's go back to when Bessent first entered the scene, and he said, I don't know about this, the Fed doing banking regulation. That really is classically should be a treasury.
Right.
It should be a treasury thing. We should do this in treasury. The Fed is doing too much. That's another dog whistle. So what I've been saying for a long time, and riffing off of things that Martin Armstrong has said in the past, that the original conception of the Federal Reserve, this will piss off every libertarian in the audience. Sorry, folks, but it's just the truth, that the original conception of the Federal Reserve was to set regional interest rates for internal capital flow to move capital where it needs to go by allowing the 12 member banks to compete amongst themselves for regional capital within the U.S. and act as a lender of last resort for the domestic commercial paper markets. It was the Banking Act of 1935 that undid both of those things by giving us one singular Fed funds rate and to forcing the Fed to defend the U.S. Treasury market. So again, nascently, kind of instinctually, I'm like, well, if we roll the Fed back to the pre-1935 to its original conception, wouldn't that be better than where we are today? As opposed to end the Fed, we repurpose the Fed under this new system where the Fed is there to be the lender of last resort domestically and the enforcer of par internationally.
Right.
And then you use trade and tariff policy to tell everybody, oh, by the way, this is the cost to pay. This is the cost. If you want to pay and you want to get dollars at par, as you just said, invest domestically. If you don't, fungal, you're paying the tariff, you're paying this, you're paying that, and you're paying the ATM fee.
Right. That's exactly it. I mean, I'm not that familiar with the old law, the Fed before. It sounds to me like the Fed was, federalization, right? It was decentralized and more open market, and then it became centralized to help us grow. And now maybe the technology, the stable coins, the product is there for us to go decentralized again in some areas. And
what I'm going to say, Vince, is it's not tough. Commies took over the government in 1930 in FDR, 1935. We got communist monetary policy. I'm sorry, that's what we did because this is how the technocratic state was built. And I've been obsessing about this over the last 18 months. about these things. I'm like, no, it's just obviously it's like, no, this is commies. Like this is the
I
way the
want to.
European Union runs things. They have this is how they're trying to move everything into and centralize the issuance of the ECB has and the member central banks over there have the exact opposite problem. They've got a
Right.
singular currency with 27 different central banks issuing debt interest, issuing euro debt at different fucking rates, and there's the ECB having to like figure out how to keep it all running. So what they're clearly wanting to do is to reverse that and go to the current model that we have at the Fed, where the ECB is the one that sets the singular interest rate for everybody else, depreciate the member central banks, and force that par value of a euro onto them, and then domestically,
right.
that's fine. But that's not. But that's what built modern Germany, right? Because the Germans used the undervalued euro to run an internalized mercantilist system on the rest of Europe. The Deutschmark should be trading at $1.60, and the lira should be trading at 80 cents. And so, what a shock! Italy runs a trade deficit with Germany. Germany looks like the center, and they've arrogated all this political power into Germany and or France, who has the cheapest energy rates and still colonizing all of Africa and yada yada yada. So that system needs to break down as well. That's why we all have to absolutely and in every way, we have to absolutely say no to more political and fiscal union in the European. Under the ECB and the European Union, this is why it needs to be fought root and branch. Otherwise, all of Europe will be turned into Mississippi.
Okay, hold on. I want to. I mean, there's so many things that I should have written down here, but that's I want to tease that last thought out because I'm not sure I understand it.
Sure.
I just want to replace a pronoun. We want to. This is why we want to stop it. Europe centralized.
We as people want if we do not want to watch Europe sink into absolute tyranny as opposed to the kind of soft tyranny they currently have today. The win for the globalists is to turn the ECB into the modern Fed over all of Europe, and thereby instantiate and ensure forever that Greece is a second class Greece is a second-class currency. That Slovenia, that Portugal, and all the states that don't have any political power. One of the things that I ran, I don't know if I talked to you about this, but I know I did this for the patrons, and I thought about the Banking Act of 1935. I thought about the Fed and the monolithic interest rate, and this idea about and about the singular euro transaction rate. It's the same thing in reverse, and the political power. And I traced the political power of individual states in the United States pre and post FDR. So in 1900, California and Mississippi both had 9 electoral votes. Okay. Then the Banking Act of 1935 happens, and the rise of the military-industrial complex and all the hot money coming into Europe and investing in our industrial sector in order to fight World War II, which is what they did, and the New Deal and everything else shunted. And the monolithic Fed funds rate meant that California, where all the capital was going, was still able to borrow at well below rates that they would have been able to borrow at under the old Fed structure. Meaning, as money was moving into California, the San Francisco Fed should have been 6%, and the Atlanta Fed should have been at 3%. But they couldn't be. Right now, that interest rate arbitrage that doesn't close, and so and again, that goes back to what you and I noted originally. Again, I'm going back to that conversation you and I had about gold. When you see an arbitrage that doesn't close, it's because there's a law or a rule or something sticking in the way.
Fucking shitty government.
And what we wound up with is by 2000 or by 2020, California with 54 electoral votes and Mississippi with 6.
Right. Because the Fed...
Because Mississippi is permanently starved of capital because investing at the Fed funds rate or getting money access to capital, the Fed funds rate for Mississippi was way over what it should have been. And then California was getting it at a couple of hundred basis points.
Welfare state subsidized by Fed policy.
Yes, by the singular interest rate, and then using that political power to reinforce their power in Washington, D.C., arrogating political capital to
Yeah, yeah.
themselves by having all the population move there and all the jobs move there, and then they get more representation in, like, they just gamed our system.
Right, right, right. The question is, the Mississippi people should have done that too, but they didn't. Why didn't they?
They couldn't,
Everyone
because
should have gamed the
there's the
system.
capital, because they didn't have enough political clout
Right, right.
to do
No, they're
so, and eventually they were
just,
starved of capital.
they're just stupid, Tom. Look. You and I go out to dinner, and everyone orders food, and it's like, okay, I'm going to throw the credit card in. And Mississippi's the country that fucking orders a corn muffin, the city
Right.
that the state corn muffin, and you and I are getting surf and turf, and we split the bill equally. And
Right.
Mississippi,
That's exactly it. No, you're bingo. Got it in one.
that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what happened. It's
And
like,
we only did that for nearly 100 years.
yeah, for 100 years we did.
Yeah, just a small thing.
Decimated.
Like every time that we went out to dinner, it's Mississippi with the corn muffin and Iowa with the corn muffin, and like,
Yeah, and California with like surf and turf. It's totally what it is. Okay, I never. That's so funny because for me I can plug into that easily, because one of the things that I've been studying for years, but it's
Mhm.
become really important recently, is everything politically and market structure wise is a fight between centralization and decentralization, which is
Mhm.
very current events for people who understand crypto. So centralization, we want to control money. Decentralization, we don't have to. Centralization, we want to have FDR. We want to have monopolistic control over an industry. Decentralization, we want free markets, and everything ebbs and flows. And you're describing this, and I'm going, yeah, we mastered centralization, and now we're in the process of decentralizing. And Europe is still trying to figure out centralization. They're screwed, right? So maybe
Right.
the arbitrage for us is to buy Mississippi and short California. Maybe that's what we should do.
Well, if we repealed the Banking Act of 1935, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Like,
I mean,
that's exactly what I'm going to do.
I mean,
I'm gonna. Yeah, you should buy Mississippi, or
yeah.
pick whatever. But what's funny is that now that, well, and interestingly enough, the other day I noted. Remember, up until a couple, maybe now it's a couple months ago, there were 9 states that didn't have a state income tax. Mississippi wasn't one of them. They are now. So they had they had a state income tax. And so now they get rid of the state income tax in this environment. That's going to offset part of the Fed funds argument. And that's why California and New York are fighting so hard for the increased SALT deduction limits in order to try and balance that fund, that flow out.
It always comes down to how much money's in their pocket, and they have to lower taxes now. And they can't afford to, because they have a whole social safety net welfare state predicated on the taxes, and the people who pay the taxes are subsidized because they get low rates, and the low rates are gone, and it's a fucking disaster.
Yeah, and for years, I used to talk to people. I remember when I sold my house in Gainesville. Right before I was building the house that I'm at now, north of Gainesville, where my wife and I were building our house, and we sold our house. Our next door neighbors wound up buying our house. Right, I didn't even put it up on the market. They heard. I ran into them at Lowe's one day, and I said, "Yeah, we're moving to there, and I'm going to sell the house." I'm like, "Really? You're going to sell the house?" Cool. We'll probably to buy it. So eventually, we just they came over and we negotiated a price, and we did the thing, and then. This is the part of the story that's interesting, is that they had access to really cheap capital from California banks at like 3 or 4% under what everybody else was paying. They were getting jumbo loans at 2%, because what was happening was, clearly at the time, the Eurodollar, the offshore money was coming in, and these banks weren't accessing the Fed for money. They were getting money through LIBOR through the LIBOR system, and they were getting subsidized that way, because there was all this money that still flowing into California. This would be 2003, by the way.
Right.
So
I
just think about that now. I was like, oh, that's how they did it. Because I'm like, how the fuck are you getting a 2% mortgage on, we sold the house for, a pittance in today's market, but how are you getting a 2% loan on that? Like, that's insane. which is why they were like buying houses all over the city and fixing them up, and then they were part of that
They
whole
were early adopters of the whole
the flipping, of the buy and flip bull crap. Yeah, oh, absolutely. And and that's why I met them. That's why I met her in the Lowe's, right? While we were building the house, because we were literally building the house. Like, we get out there. I had, I need shingles, and I'd like go to Lowe's and I go buy 5 packs of shingles and put them on the cart and drive back up to the home site and start, pounding shingles. I was going to Lowe's and Ace Hardware all the time while building the house. Right. Because you ran short, we ran out of screws or this or whatever.
It's your local hardware store, right? Exactly.
So,
but they were there to buy stuff to fix up their new
fix up whatever it was that they were gonna buy and flip. Yes.
Was she a pole dancer?
Was that?
No, was she a pole dancer?
No, she wasn't. No, she wasn't.
That's the Big Short.
I liked her. I hated her husband, but I liked her. She was great.
Well, of course, because she's a woman and he's a man, right?
No, because he was a shit. Because he was a limey.
Euro-dollar buyer.
He was a limey. It was worse than anything else. He was a fucking limey. So there it is. It all comes full circle, folks. And now you know why. Now you know why I don't like the British.
Let's talk about Italian racism for a second.
Say that again.
Let's talk about Italian racism that Italians feel. Right? Okay.
Long and deep.
I think even though we're from different necks of the woods, I think there is an overlap that goes beyond geography, and it goes back to being Italian. I remember growing up, I hated the Irish. So when you said limey, I'm like, Irish. To me, they're all Irish. You know what I mean?
I say,
where I grew up, and he was not Italian, is Irish. So it's like, anyway. Having being a little bit Irish, I'm self-loathing, I guess. But that's the way. The reason I thought is because I saw The Untouchables, where Andy Garcia is confronted by, and it's a scene. He goes, "Oh, another thieving Dago Wop,"
That's right. Yeah,
that's exactly.
Based on that, and then some fucking, and he calls him a Mick or some shit like that. They're like, "Oh, I like it."
Fucking.
Yeah, it's a great scene. No, for me, it's I grew up with my dad who was going on to the New York NY, who moved from the state troopers to the NYPD, and then in the late 1950s after he met my mom and started a family, and it was dominated by the Irish, and he couldn't get anything done because his name ended in a vowel. The vowel, the O was on the wrong end of the name. It wasn't O'Malley, he was Luonga. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's so. But I never really held it against the Irish per se, because I always thought they were really cool, and they are as a people. I think they're much different than British. So let's just not even get there. So
right. So for me, I'm the racist because I generalize limey. Everyone's Irish.
Oh, absolutely, you are. Jesus Christ,
you just hate the fucking Brits, and
I just hate City of London, and
yeah, you do. You do hate
and that class of people. Like what they've done to Little England is disgusting. So
and. I'm not gonna defend them, but I'm just gonna throw something out there. That's the stablecoin concept. So one of the things I plugged into early about stablecoins is going to have to do with London. Is that as the more authoritarian side of the world, so we'll say China and Russia, or China primarily, goes with goes with CBDC, that won't fly in the West, and it will not fly in the US. It actually could. They're trying to make it fly in England and Europe, but it won't fly in the US. Stable coins, for better and worse, primarily for better, are the West's answer to central bank digital currency, and they will fly because eventually the government won't have control over our money. The banks will. So anyway, whatever banks are left. But I guess what I'm saying is that stable coins really, really undermine financial intermediators, and that would be, it's like money changer stuff. Like when you look at even what the BRICS are doing, the BRICS pay concept is to be able to change your currency into anything you want without going to an FX change, and by the way, that's centralization. They're centralizing at the nation state level. Isn't that what we're doing here? Like in some things,
yes.
Like I feel like some of our things are becoming centralized. And
this is why the XRP / Ripple part of the conversation so very obvious, which is that we're, Ripple as a concept, right? Ripple Labs and
Right.
XRP, they've been trying to sell that to whoever will win the war for a long time. And we've just made the move that no, Ripple is going to become an American asset. Ripple is XRP at the end of the day does away with City of London's main business,
Right.
which is FX intermediation. Now,
Right.
the other thing, just your point on banks, which again, I'm not shilling for Ripple. I'm just telling you this is what's happening. I don't give a shit
Right.
one way or the other.
Ripple's like,
Anybody can build a Ripple style network, but they've done it and they've got the partners and they're clearly signing up the clients and 85% of Japanese banks are on board with it. Guess what? Japan is a partner of the United States, not Europe. It's that's just the way things work. Now, the last point on that is your point about banks and how many of them survive. Actually, I think what this is doing is it's getting the banks back to their core business, which is net interest margin banking, finding the investments so they can stop being casinos and they can go back to financing and doing proper risk assessment of investment processes, investments that are and projects that need to be built, and that's where they should be.
It would be, it. I haven't been thinking about it from that point of view, but that is a good way to think about it. Post Glass-Steagall, after Glass-Steagall was repealed, banks started gambling, right, to simplify it, right, and now there is a movement on the left. You're describing the rights version of it. There's a movement on the left to make banks utilities. Okay, like in the sense that let them only do their core business. And of course, but lumped in with that is MMT and let's kill capitalism and all that other shit, right? Meanwhile, on the right, at the extreme libertarian, it's like it would be a more to the right version of what you're talking about. But I guess what I'm talking about is banks will split again into investment merchant bank, right? Right. And they might not even be called that versus like specializations. PayPal and Venmo, that's an aspect of a bank. JP Morgan's another commercial bank, wire transfer bank, merchant bank. And so the decentralized this is the point. The point is you have a centralized product called Ripple, right? Right. You have a centralized tool that the government can use that allows the banking to be decentralized. Of course, a lot can go wrong there, right? Everyone can pick their specialty. I want to buy Musician Magazine. You want to buy Drummer. He wants to buy, everything's fucking specialty oriented. On the left, it's the same idea. Let's use Ripple to control the bank. So I get it. One is through centralization and the other is through decentralization. And I think what will happen is, to your point, I think as the forest gets thinned for the trees, and there's only like these two monolithic firms left, like JP Morgan and Bank of America, all these other smaller ones will pick their specialty, whatever it is. Left-handed.
I know. I agree with you, and I think it's actually, the model has to be that there's going to be the model has to be that that we're going to go back to actually empowering regional banks and local banks and credit unions and everything else by this kind of decentralized process. And we're reaching the nadir, the apex of the big bank, central bank dominated markets, where only the money center banks and have any kind of political control. And what got me started down this path, is, you remember this, is that I said, well, Davos's plan is to do away with commercial banking completely. Is to have a direct relationship between the central bank and the consumer, and then control the consumer through the central bank.
CBDC.
And CBDCs, right. And in that model, you would of course have the commercial banks then turn around and go, no, you're not going to have JP Morgan like give that shit up. Like that's why I'm like, oh no, Jamie Dimon is not going to be down with that. I mean, just conceptually, it makes no sense. So that also means that if they want to survive, they're going to have to give up certain aspects of their system. Though the other thing I've always said is that, but at the end of the day, does JP Morgan really want, the business to build a library in fucking Palatka? No, of course they don't. They want the big projects. They want the the nuclear power plants. They want the pipelines and the
JP
refineries.
Morgan
And that's
Energy.
what
JP
right.
Morgan Energy is bigger than JP Morgan other stuff. Yeah,
But
exactly.
you understand what I mean. They want the big projects, right? And they want to help Lockheed Martin build an F-35 that works, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. And
right.
so you're and they can do net interest margin on banking on that, and some of that's going to be subsidized by the government. It is what it is, and that's fine. I don't care. Like what matters is that the capital is available for the small banks, that they don't have to compete with J.P. Morgan for your fucking car loan. Like it
Right. And that
makes
would be and that's it. I'd like JP Morgan to get out of the shit that they don't add value in.
right,
To let
right,
other to let that branch of the tree needs to be cleared so the
right.
other
Right,
fucking
so that everybody else can start to grow, and
yeah,
so because they're blocking out all the sun, to extend the
right.
metaphor, like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that
No,
and that's the way that's the way we have to start looking at this. That is the goal that we need to be um elucidating, bringing to the table, and
right,
and that's going to be the gib for a guy like Diamond to get on board with all this, even though he has antipathy to all these things, because
right,
he's doing his best to protect his business.
right,
And but I think even Diamond and Solomon and the rest of them, I think they understand that this system is unworkable. So they're still going to be able to go out into the world and build big dams out in, I don't know, fucking Central Africa or whatever. They're going to be able to do that, and
right.
there's going to be a market for U.S. dollars in those markets in a way that hasn't been there before. That they don't have to bear the burden of providing the liquidity for either, because of all the stablecoin shit that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Just to
That's
kind of
right.
wrap around that. So,
To bring it back, full circle.
yeah,
I,
we've been right back. I don't know how we got there, but we got there, but that's
we
what
got
happened.
there. We got back to it. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's really good. So now that we solved the world's problems, what's left to talk about?
I don't know. You and I have been talking forever in a friggin' day, because we got like 40 minutes before we even like hit record on the podcast. So
I
I
know.
don't know, Vince. Like, what else do we want to talk about? What else are you saying? We can talk about gold. Like, we can talk about what's happening there. I mean, what I mean by that is that, look at the geopolitical picture and how that's affecting those other markets. I don't know if you want to, do 5 or 10 minutes on
No,
that.
we could do quick current events because I don't know when this is going to air, but
Probably
I
tomorrow.
think what we're about to talk about is it'll be relevant even if it airs a couple of days from now. Since the today while we're recording this, gold's up $60, silver's up 4%, natural gas is up 1 billion%.
Right.
Oil's up $2. Stocks are struggling to be unchanged. Last I looked, bonds are down a little bit. The dollar's weaker, and the behavior today, and it's easiest to see in commodities. Copper was up 4%,
Mm-hmm.
5% at one point. I think over the weekend, two things happened that shook the market out of its complacency. Meaning, since since the Ukraine Russia peace talks were scheduled, and since Trump and Xi had a 90-day reprieve on the tariffs, Trump's popularity went up, stock market stabilized, bond market stabilized. For whether you agree with the stability or not, it's happening, and markets started to float a little bit higher. And gold was under a little bit of pressure, and the dollar and the bond market started acting what we would consider normal again. And then over the weekend, you know, the Ukraine Russian war just exploded because, hey, if we're going to have a negotiation, we may as well just fucking get in our shots before we sit at the table, because we want to get as much as we can on our own land grabs. And then Xi comes back and says, or China comes back and says, we think the U.S. is cheating too, and so everything's blown out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everyone's front running tariffs again. Buy all the copper before the tariffs get turned back on. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
hope is out of the market again. And the only thing
Mm-hmm.
that's defying that is stocks. And I think stocks are up because they're manipulated. But hey, what am I going to say there? But
No, I
I
mean, again, it's a bit I just have to you have to look at, like, certainly the Dow. It's always been my argument that the Dow has to be looked at like a hard asset. It's a thing you run into because it's a big pool of liquidity that people can park capital in without moving price.
right.
And it's hard, and it's relatively a hard asset. And I, the bigger, I don't think the Dow is manipulated. I be honest with you, I think I look at the German DAX, I look at the French CAC 40, I look at the Eurostox 50, I look at the FTSE. Those are the manipulated markets.
Well,
Um,
I'm throwing hyperbole out there, except to say that only to say that the stock market goes up because when it's down because somebody catches the knife, and that knife
mhm.
catcher is
Oh,
there
sure.
to that kind of stabilizing. Yeah, I don't.
I have to say I love what I'm seeing in silver this morning. This afternoon, like trading it. I only ever I don't watch the futures price. I only ever watch the spot price, and it's
Right.
very clear that we're about to clear this congestion area. And the only thing that happened last week was that they were clearly banging the fucking monthly close. And they did it in Bitcoin, they did it in gold, they did it in silver. They banged the crap out of oil in order to like it was, and then
Yeah.
they've all just bounced this
Right.
morning. Like, and you have to ask yourself the question, like, you knew you were banging the close on. I'm speaking for London. You knew you were going to bang the friggin' monthly close on Friday, and only to have the Ukrainians, send the world into a tizzy on Monday morning. Like, okay, so you won that rounds, and what you reloaded a little bit, but you're now picking up nickels in front of a freight train if you're short in these markets.
Yeah, that's true. The silver thing, if I could just add something on specifically about silver, and it also applies to oil as well, but silver is something that people never talked about, but now they're finally talking about it. And
Mm,
that is your if you're looking at the tariff situation, tariff on, tariff on means buy gold, tariff off means buy copper. And in
right.
between is silver. And if you're buying gold, in a world of specialization, we want to have a pure play on this, a pure play on that. Silver gets sold when people buy gold, or put it this way, it doesn't get bought as much.
Right.
I'm buying gold because recession or inflation, and then people sell
And what?
silver when they buy copper. And so for the last a billion years, because I made part of my living doing this, people sell silver and buy gold when they think there's going to be tariffs on, and they sell silver and buy copper when they think tariffs are off. And so every so often it gets really out of whack, and someone says, "Wait a minute, tariffs on," which is what happened this weekend, and we need to pre-stock. And so copper goes up 5%, 4%, I should say. Gold goes up 1.5%, 2%, and silver is just dicking around up 1%. And then silver just explodes and it's up 4 or 5% now. So
Mhm.
so I think what you have is you have a class of investors, American CTAs. I know this. A class of investors that say, "Oh, I think I want to buy gold for this and I want to buy copper for that." And overall just keep selling silver. And they're getting their asses handed to them. Now, the reason I say it's related to oil is that's what happens in silver all the time, forever. Oil, everyone's long stocks, and they had been selling oil as an economic hedge. They've been selling copper as an economic hedge as well, in part. And so I think, everyone's like, "Oh, OPEC is going to pump more." And so now we're in a completely geopolitics is not going away. Let's put it that way. So
and
yeah,
and in that scenario, everybody goes to money goes to the ground, and it becomes even more important that people remind themselves that you can play the game about the dollar versus gold and this versus that and inflation, the tariffs, and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, when you're not sure whether there's going to be a world tomorrow or not, you're buying gold. And this
right.
is the Martin Armstrong's point over and that I think it's important that over the long run, is gold an inflation hedge? Of course. Does it preserve your purchasing power of your savings so that you can go buy a house today with the same number of ounces of gold you could have 50 years ago? In the long run, you're correct about that. But what gets gold to those nosebleed prices is, and to correct upwards, is geopolitical risk. Gold in the
Right.
short term moves on geopolitical risk and then goes up and then doesn't give everything back. And
Well,
that's
that's
how it expresses itself. So when you look at the monthly chart of gold or the quarterly chart of gold, yeah, it's an inflation story, or an annual chart of gold, it's an inflation story. But at the weekly or the daily or even the monthly level, it's a geopolitical story. And you have to gauge your time with gold in particular. And I think and then silver and copper is the same way on
right.
geopolitical risk. Like, you know, copper $5 a pound, or 4.86 a pound, but above $5 a pound. That's, dude. People are worried about World War fucking three. It says
Right.
as a, they're not front running tariffs, not any of that shit. They're worried about World
Right.
War three. And I'm like, how do I survive? Then there's the other angle on this, of course, is that everybody's now building freaking power plants. And if they're building power plants, that means that they're building and upgrading the electrical grid to distribute that power. And we're now into, copper's massively underinvested, folks.
So we're supposed to take $3, buy one gold, buy one silver, buy one copper, and then margin it, and then buy oil with that. That's basically what we have. That's basically what we have to, or natural gas, right? By the way, one of the things I said this morning, I was thinking about you when I said it. Natural gas opens up like fucking 8%, and I go, "Oh, Europe is so fucked." Like more sanctions, and I was like, at least it happened during the summertime. I hope they have, but by 2030, Europe's going to be using coal. There'll be nothing else. And that'll keep Great Britain in business. Great Britain probably wants to blow up another pipeline so they can start exporting coal. I mean, anyway, so that's it.
No, you're right. It's like what Vince just touched on is the great joke that what did socialists use before candles? Electricity.
Before and after.
So it's the same kind of thing. What did France use before coal? Nuclear power. It's the same thing. Or well, in this case, Germany. But yes. So there you go. Vince, has been fun. It's been great as always. I'm so happy to have caught up with you today. I think this was the exact right moment for you and I to sit down and have this chat. Tell everybody where they can find you, do the plug, because at the end of the day we are selling, folks. So let's do the thing.
Right. That's right. Goldfix on Substack, VBL, Victor Boy Larry, Goldfix, Substack.com. So just Goldfix will pull it up. There's no competition unless you're looking for how London manipulates the gold fix like they used to. And I'm on Twitter as well under Soren the K. But look for me.
Is that what that actually means? Soren the K? Because to me,
I was a big fan of Soren Kierkegaard, and I was like, I'll do Soren Kierkegaard.
I see.
So I went Soren the K. And at the time it made sense because that was my backup account and had a picture of Soren Kierkegaard with some, chick with cleavage sitting next to him. It was great. And then of course my Twitter account got blocked, so I had to use
your backup account. That's hilarious. I had no idea that I was like, Soren thing, what the fuck is that? But whatever. I in a previous life, as always, if
I had the picture up, he would have picked it up right away. That's it.
And he's Soren the K on Twitter. I'm TFL1728, Patreon /Gold Goats and Guns. You guys know the drill. So with that said, we're out. You guys be well. Take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.